life happens at work, right? Just because your career spans 25 to 65 years old, that's a long time, and in that timeline life happens. We have families, things happen, and we retire. And organizations always speak about, we want you to bring your whole self to work. And it's like, well, that's amazing, but that means you also have to be, as an organization, be prepared to support the whole self.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Finding Equilibrium show. I'm delighted to be here, delighted you're here, and delighted to have my guest. My guest today is Rebecca Grainger. Hello, Rebecca. Nice to see you. Rebecca is the founder of triiyo, a really exciting business which is very core to everything that we speak about. So, how are you today, Rebecca? You're looking.
I'm really good.
Very well. Where are you?
Yes, I'm on the northern beaches. So, enjoyed some sun and some fresh air this morning, and it's a good way to start the day and lift the spirits.
Wonderful. So northern beaches, but that accent isn't a northern beaches accent.
No, 12 years here, but originally from the UK.
Amazing. So for people who aren't familiar with triiyo or familiar with you and your work, I'd love you to just introduce yourself to the audience so people know who you are and a little bit about triiyo. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, so triiyo is a employee-centric connectivity platform. We sit external to an organization, and we simplify the way that organizations, managers and teams connect and communicate through periods of change and workplace transition. So parental leave all the way through to retirement planning and everything in between. So workers' compensation, mental health, carers leave, any form of returning to work. How do we stay connected to people as they go through these life events? How do we keep them engaged and get them to return and stay within the organization long term?
Amazing. So you said two words there that I noted down. You said simplify and connect, and I think these are two very powerful words, particularly in this time when there's so much going on, and we're craving simplicity, and also when we're currently speaking, we're both in lockdown here in Sydney, and that word connection I think has taken on a whole new meaning. But before we jump into those, and I really want to ask you lots of questions about both of those points and about triiyo, I'd love to understand your journey. And so clearly you're from the UK, you're now living in the northern beaches, you've created this amazing business to help simplify and connect people. But how did this come about? Like, what was your path? I'd love to know a little bit about your journey to this point.
Yeah, well, like most things that, when you sort of get into a period of creation, it often is stemmed from a bit of a crack. And that for me was pregnancy discrimination in the organisation I was with about 8 years ago. And I started career coaching at 4.5 months pregnant, and everyone that came to me were women, and they were either on maternity leave back then, it's now sort of parental leave, or they'd returned to work, and they were all looking for a new job. And to me, I'd spent my career to date in recruiting and putting women on shortlists to meet diversity targets, and it was crazy. We were at the top of our career, wanting to work professional, and we were being forgotten about, essentially falling into a black hole. And it was two things: they were disengaged and they were disconnected. And so I thought, then how can I create a way for organizations to focus on retention? And the issue at the time was that managers were untrained and unsupported. So they were the linchpin between the organization and having amazing policies and the employee having a good or a bad experience. But because they were untrained, they either weren't doing anything or doing and saying the wrong thing. And that was creating a negative outcome. Fast forward to 2018, I joined a technology accelerator. I'm obviously a non-tech founder. And in 2019, we went to market with our first platform. So it's called an MVP, a minimal viable product. And very quickly, we sold that to 4 businesses. And in the process of selling that, at the time, that was purely just to support parental leave. But in the process of selling that, we were told, we have this problem of connectivity, and how do we support people through these transitions, through every workplace transition? It's not just parental leave. So how, can you support us with that? So we've recently, at the beginning of this year, completed a seed round, and we are launching this month our expanded platform that is a broad connectivity platform that supports every workplace transition.
Amazing. And if ever there was a solution to a problem, it feels like you've really you've really picked the right time. So just tell me, because when anybody sets up a business and goes for an accelerator, that requires, it always sounds easy, and we often look at the success, we think, wow, they've got this amazing business, but the journey to that success, we know, as founder myself, it's a lot of work, a lot of energy, a lot of sacrifice. What drives you through the ups and downs? Because you've just kind of highlighted, you got seed capital, you did, and it sounds really easy. It's like ABC, did this, and I've just kind of, but I know that you've put an enormous amount of energy, and there must have been some real, real ups and downs during this actual journey. So what's driven you through those ups and downs? And I'd love you to share maybe some of the downs, if you like, and how you have been able to overcome those periods.
Yeah, look, I often look back and think, if you knew how hard it was going to be, would you have started? And I don't know, because there's been many times where I've kind of been at breaking point. And being a solo founder is incredibly lonely, and it's incredibly hard. And obviously the last 18 months have really not helped in many ways, apart from one way, and that is highlighted the need for human connection. But if I sort of go back to when we started, I think I was so surprised about experiencing discrimination myself, and then realizing that I really wasn't alone. I didn't have any idea how prevalent it was, not just for women, but also men. And really thinking, how can we do this better? Women, we're professional, we want to work, we have to be part of the work community, but equally men need to have the opportunity to parent at an equal level. So it was it was that inclusion and the equality and equity piece that really drove me from the beginning. And then when COVID hit, I was part-time in triiyo, part-time consulting. I lost my consulting role at the time, and I was full-time in triiyo. So that was an incredibly difficult period of time, because we were selling to HR people. They didn't have the capacity to talk to us. When lockdowns first hit, they were, moving people into remote working, which overnight, some companies that had said, we can never do this, suddenly overnight, everyone's remote working. And, literally overnight, everything changed. But like I said, it's, whereas before, part of our education piece when we were talking to potential customers was, connectivity and communication is key to engagement. And making sure your people feel included and connected, and maintaining that sense of belonging, even though they're out of the business. And then, all of those facets have become absolutely imperative today, because we have this whole hybrid way of working. We're not going to go back to a 9 to 5 in the office, 5 days a week. We've got people remote working, and now completely regionally. We've moved away from the cities. So organizations, as hard as it has been, and I can talk about the things that I've done to sort of, maintain that grounding and sort of center. But as hard as it's also been a bit of a light, because it's really highlighted one piece that I've always truly believed in, and that is the power of human connection. And so if I sort of talk about the things that I've done, my background, 10 years ago, I got into Reiki healing, meditation, mindfulness. I have a strong practice in that side. And last year in particular, and obviously moving into this other period of restriction and lockdown, I think that really helps to keep me grounded. And the other thing is really believing in what you're doing. I believe we can make a change. I could believe organizations want to do the right thing. I believe humans want to do the right thing. And we just don't always have the tools we're not always equipped to do that. I think our intention is to do what's best for our people and for humans in general. And having that, maintaining that North Star has always been critical, I think, for me to just keep going forward in, you know, even in the stormy seas, you know, just if you believe in what you're doing, you're believing you can make change. And we were getting, you know, we get such positive feedback and people are like, we need this. And I think that just keeps you going. And then when we managed, and it took months, I mean, raising capital, particularly as a woman, a non-tech woman in the tech space, was incredibly difficult. I've never had so many no's in my life. But you just, I don't know, you know, you just, I guess, become resilient. And, you know, you're, nothing great comes easy, right? So
absolutely,
we just keep going.
You do. I thank you very much for sharing that with us. Just underline that point around belief. You know, it's because there must have been periods where your belief wavered a little bit, but reminding yourself, and it's often those moments when because it sounds to me like your journey has very much been a belief around that people want to create great workplaces. But if you don't have the tools, it fits into the we have to compromise. You know, we know that we would like to, you know, support people and connect people, but we just, it's in the too hard box. So that has driven you to kind of create the tools and to overcome those many no's until you got the yes. So, you know, huge congratulations for doing that. I want to just move on now and just pick up on that conversation about connection. So when I think about, and we're all going through this, 18 months ago, overnight, as you say, we all had to embrace remote working. There've been many companies who'd embraced it prior to that, but they were very much in the you know, on the fringes.
Yeah, they were absolute minorities at that point.
Minorities, and we didn't believe it was possible. Whereas, of course, now we know it's possible because we've got the experience around that. But what are some of the things that an HR manager or a head of well-being or a general manager who is now having to learn to engage with a team that are remote and will continue to be remote, at least for part of the week, it creates different requirements. You know, I know myself as a manager of, you know, many people over the years, I was managing remote people because they were in different countries, but I would fly and visit them, and we got a lot of you know, work done when we had those in-person connections. But if you're not allowed or not able to have those in-person connections, I'd love you to share some of the things that we can do as organizations to create spaces for people to connect, to build relationships, to feel part of something, you know, to feel that they belong. And because I hear so many stories of people who've been onboarded, you know, joined a company a year ago, never met their colleagues, you know, never ever met their colleagues. And this seems extraordinary in some ways. You know, I guess in the past, if you were living in one side of the world and working with colleagues in the other, then that was very normal. But this is now everybody's reality. So things that people can do. I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, first, I would say that this remote working and hybrid working is fantastic in many ways. You know, it really does start to break down the barriers where parents, for example, previously were really exposed when they were needing flexible working or part-time work, whereas now, you know, we can integrate our life a lot better because of remote working. So that's a huge positive, you know, in everyone. You know, I always believe it should be flex for all. You know, it shouldn't just be the parents and they're highlighted and kind of sidelined in some way. But now, you know, we do have flexibility for everyone. There's some grey areas with that because you're kind of on tap 24/7. So I do know some companies sort of implement, you know, no emails past a certain time and in some downtime, things like that. But what we do miss, as you know, by being out of the office, is that ability to build social capital within the workplace and within the workforce. So many people went to work for socialization. You know, it was part of their daily and weekly social network. And although we see people and we see faces every single day, it's not the same. We don't have the same ability to check in on a personal level. So what we've done at triiyo, and this stemmed from people being on leave but still wanting to feel connected and part of the team. What we have is we've created one, it's an external platform, so it's confidential. It's employee centric, it's employee led, so people choose to come onto the platform. Everyone within the organization is invited, so nobody feels, it basically creates safety. It removes the psychological barriers of going somewhere and seeking out support beyond the BAU. So support, whether that's around mental health or parenting and so forth. But we've also created community. So every organization has the ability to create channels within our platform, which speak to groups of people, whether that's dads at work, parents, job sharers, part-timers, graduates, and individuals within the organizations can create channels to connect with like minds. So this isn't a place where people talk about work. It might be your footy fanatics, that used to connect on the football field, but now people have moved away and they miss that social connection of having their Friday lunch footy team. So they might have a community channel. And we also have created direct messaging, so it's a way for individuals and small groups to privately connect, so this, but on a social scale. So it's driving the social capital within the organization. And because we're external, it is a safe place. We remove the psychological barriers of signing up, and it's outside of the noise of your inbox or your Slack channel and all of the that we already have that exists in work, but it sits outside. So it's almost like you have your internal communications internally, and you have the ability to have your internal comms but external. And that also creates the way for the organization to consistently communicate with their people who are on leave. Because some organizations, when you're on leave for an extended period, they lose access to their email or the intranet. Whereas with us, the employee is already within our platform. So the organization has a community channel or a company channel where they can consistently communicate their news to their people during their periods of leave.
That sounds wonderful. So it sounds to me like the image that came to my mind as you were speaking was like a virtual version of the smoking room in some ways, where people
or the water cooler,
or kitchen,
the kitchen,
those kinds of places where people bump into each other and have, unplanned conversations, which are very, very important. And of course, in a remote world, you don't get that. So you've created the virtual water cooler. That's amazing. Yeah, that is really an interesting solution to a problem, because you use the word social capital a lot. I'd love you to define what you mean by that. Social capital. What is social capital in simple terms?
The way we're looking at it is sort of the ability to drive the social connectivity within a workplace, which that creating that fabric where people can connect, but beyond their day-to-day work activities. So beyond BAU, that's the sort of environment where we want to sit.
Well, that's really good. Let's talk about the other big word that you raised right at the start, which is simplicity. And because life does feel, I wrote a blog post about this myself yesterday, actually, because it's really interesting, because when I was working in corporate and I was flying all over the place, I craved for a simpler life. And now my life is a lot simpler, but I crave for international travel. It's really interesting. Feels like I'll never be completely happy.
Yes.
But it is around balance. It's about getting the balance between the two. But sometimes a lot of the systems can overcomplicate things. Even now going into the shops can feel complicated because we have to check in. So it's added a blocker. We have to wear masks. We have to do all these things. So it feels that life is becoming more complicated, simpler in one way, but more complicated in another. And when you're in an organization and you're trying to do the best things for your people, and we are now aware that our people are, we've talked about whole lives and bring your
Mm.
whole self to work, those types of terms, which I
Mm.
really, really like. And it sounds great as a concept, but what it actually means in practical terms is it can be challenging.
More complexity.
Exactly, it adds more complexity. It all feels that these ideas add more complexity
Yes.
to an HR team who are already stretched and were
Yeah.
already stretched. So talk to me about some of the things that triiyo does to remove that complexity, to bring simplicity, to make things easy for people, because that's what we all need now. We need simplicity to be able to free up our time to invest in family or exercise or whatever we want to do that brings us
yeah. I mean, we say, you know, life happens at work, right? You know, just because your career spans, you know, 25 to 65 years old, that's a long time. And in that timeline, life happens. You know, we have families, things happen, and we retire. And organizations always speak about, you know, we want you to bring your whole self to work. And it's like, well, that's amazing. But that means you also have to be, as an organization, be prepared to support the whole self. You can't just sort of say, yeah, but we're still only going to support this professional part. You know, it's like, no, you know, life happens. So, you know, yeah, you're right. How can organizations support those people? And how can managers support multiple people across multiple transitions at any one time, across the time that they're responsible for people? It is highly complex, and you know, managers shouldn't be expected to be experts in all of these facets of people's lives and how, you know, the legalities and the regulations around that. So one of the key ways that we've solved this problem is through a communication flow. So when an employee starts a journey, we call it a journey or a workplace transition. So say either mental health or parental leave. Let's take parental leave, it's the most complex. They pop in their dates, they start a journey, they pop in their individual dates, and that triggers a communication flow that goes to the manager and the employee that is pre-populated, configured to the employer, but personalized and tailored to that individual's dates. So we will guide the manager on what to do, when, how, and why, based on that person's dates, and we will hold the hand of the employee through that whole journey. But that is before, during, and 12 months after leave. So our focus isn't just you know, the legislation, the regulations of, you know, how do we get people out of the business, but we focus on how do we keep them connected, and how do we support them and integrate them and transition them back into the business, not just for that first month, but for the 12 months after. Because what we found when we did our research is organizations measure their return rate, and often organizations do have a good return, but what is their long-term retention? And when we look at what's happening at the moment, we have a war on talent in Australia. We do not have enough talent onshore. Our borders are closed, so the movement of people isn't happening. Salaries are going up exponentially in the tech space. I can tell you that for sure. And so organizations are really focused around retention and employee engagement and productivity. And that then also leads into the well-being of our people, because, you know, these life events and just the change that people are experiencing at the moment is obviously having a huge effect on mental health and mental wellness. And as an employer, I do think it's important that we need to look at how do we support the whole self, and how do we make that simple when they are external to our business. We don't have them in our business. So how do we, you know, check in and manage those people when they're remote, they're, you know, disconnected?
I love that. It reminds me, because I was a chief marketing officer for a company for 9 years. So this point around life happens when,
Yeah.
What was your say?
Life happens at work.
Life happens at work. I mean, I really relate to that. And there was one period I had nine people who were on maternity leave at the time. So
Wow.
being able to manage that was huge, because there was so much change happening, and it was my job manager to keep those people engaged and to make sure. And often, and one thing I learned was when you are out of the business, you do worry. They were worried about, particularly when there's an organizational change, what does it mean? Have I got a job? So I spent a lot of time. So I would have just loved to have had you around to just support that, because that can all be programmed in. Then effectively what you're saying is you've got a communication approach. And I love this point around holding the hand of both the employee and the manager, because it is a partnership ultimately in terms of being through those transitions. And the other big thing I learned is if you manage that experience really, really well, people do come back, and then you build loyalty in the organization. Because if you do take that longer term, and because I had 9 years to really look at it, so that was a lot of data, you really do see the impact. If you treat people really well when they're going through those big transitions, that builds loyalty, that builds a feeling that the organization actually cares about you as a person, and that supports your retention. And we had great retention, because of that. But it was a very, very manual process, and it required specific managers, I guess. I prioritized that employee experience me, but many others, prioritize other things. So that sounds incredibly helpful. One thing you said, and I just want to talk a little bit about trust as a key driver of employee engagement, because it sounds, when we talk about it without exact specific examples, it can feel very it makes sense, like there's nothing, no one can challenge that. But then we start throwing in the word trust, and some employees don't feel that they want to bring their whole self to work because they may be judged, they may be criticized, it may affect their careers, so we hide, and we all do it, we hide bits, and we think, okay, well, I don't want to actually share that with people, because they might not think of me as a good person, or whatever it is. What are your thoughts on that? Like, how can triiyo or any kind of broader thoughts really support that kind of trust relationship? I know it's confidential and the system is outside, so people. But you mentioned the word safe spaces. What does that mean exactly?
It's really looking at the psychological safety that an organization can create for its people. And we know that the more safe people feel, the more innovative and productive that they are. So they are far more willing to bring their whole self to work. The issue, we've done a lot of research. So some of the issues that came up were, I don't know who's monitoring the intranet. If I look for a parental leave policy or the mental health policy, is that going to flag something up? Secondly, the internet is so full of information, I don't actually know where to look for it. And I don't want to necessarily tell my manager that, hey, what's our parental leave policy here? Because I don't want that to almost feel like I've got a black mark and it's going to affect my, the next career promotion, because who knows how long it's going to take for you to get pregnant. And if you're going through, sort of a mental health period, there's, until we start removing the barriers, until we start making this normal, we remove the stigma around whether it's parenting, mental health, caring for, a parent, whatever these life events are, we really need to start removing the stigma and normalizing life within the workplace. So one of the ways that we've looked at that is within our platform, we have partnered with experts across every transition and every area that will affect an employee going through a transition or their well-being. So that includes well-being, health and well-being, finances. We have some resources and support for managers specifically, and then everything around, life events, counselling, coaching, parental leave, retirement. We have experts that provide us with content on our platform. We also host the company's resources that relate to these areas on the platform. So we create this safe space for people to seek advice. We promote a company's EAP, but it's in a safe space where they don't feel that they're being monitored. And what we believe and what we are seeing is that people start reaching out and getting support sooner than what they previously have done. And this is great for an organization. And when an organization has a platform that is so transparent about these are our policies, these are our procedures, and this is how we will openly help you through every life event and transition you will have whilst you're in our workplace, it creates that feeling of safety, of acceptance, of belonging. And that is incredibly powerful. So when we then look at the retention and you were sort of talking about how, looking after your employees, it's not just the people that are on leave. You've got all the other people that are going, well, that's going to be me at some point in the future. How are they treating my colleagues? What's going on? Do I actually stay here because one day that's going to be me, i.e. I might become a parent, or do I actually find another employer that's going to care for me better?
So true. I mean, it's so interesting because you really are looking at it over a longer period, because you're right.
Yeah.
The way you treat one person is the way you treat everybody. So you really are setting the tone for your culture and your whole business.
Yeah. And even as managers, we have some managers that are amazing and some managers that aren't so great in this stuff. But how do you get every employee to have the same consistent experience? You want every employee, irrespective of their manager, to have a positive experience within the workplace as they go through these events. And so with us, because we're guiding the manager, every employee has the same experience. They have it's highly engaging, it's positive, and that has a huge impact on the overall experience of your people,
of everyone. Yeah, well, that's that consistency is the way you build trust, and that's what people look for. So last question from me. It all sounds really, really wonderful. Are there examples or any brands that you can highlight of organizations who do this well, who are consistent, who are actually, caring about their whole people, if you like, but also doing well business-wise? Because I still feel, and I'm immersed in the whole well-being at work, but I still get the sense when I talk to business leaders that people get it, but it's getting the balance between the well-being, the productivity of their people, because there is still this sense that if you focus too much on well-being, then you're going to be sacrificed. You're not going to be focused on sales or marketing. My belief is that well-being is the foundation of everything, and you get better sales, you get better marketing, you get better productivity, innovation, and all of those things in the way you've been describing. But I'd love any examples that come to your mind, if you have any, of organizations who do this well, that can be lighthouses for us to learn from.
Look, I think there's a huge number of organisations that are investing heavily into policy, particularly looking at driving, parental leave equality. So we've got IBM, we've got Linktree, we've got Zipco, we've got Brosa, we've got Medibank, Westpac, the small companies, Canva, all the way to big, huge enterprises. A lot of companies are investing in policy. What I say to that is that your biggest issue is to get your ROI on your investment into policy. Your people here still have to have a positive experience, and the person that's in the middle that determines whether your employees have a positive or a negative experience are your managers. They are really the linchpin that is the midpoint between amazing policy, huge investment, which is fantastic and should continue, to the employees' actual personal experience. And often that is where the disconnect comes, because there is not a process that helps guide the manager through making sure that the employee has a benefit, sort of receives the benefits of the policy and has a positive experience. And that's where they lose on the ROI.
So really champion the manager, support the manager, guide the manager, and then you'll be able to connect your policy and your strategy with the day-to-day experience of both your employees and your customers, because ultimately the employees are going to be touching the customers and impacting their experience.
Yeah. Because a policy will attract people, policy will keep people. But if at the end of the day, the experience on the ground is negative, then you're still going to lose them long term.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is really, having been a senior manager, that's what's really frustrating, is that the experience, people don't know what the policy or what the intention is at a senior level, and they just know what they experience from their own manager. And if that is a disconnected, inconsistent experience, then sadly that organization loses really good talent. And when you think about it, from a recruitment point of view, the costs, I did this calculation myself once, like to actually replace an employee, something like 4 times their salary. I mean, it's a huge investment in terms of training, recruiting, training, onboarding. So you really, the ROI really makes so much sense.
Absolutely.
Any final words from you? I'd love you to share where people can find out more about triiyo, about yourself, and where can people learn more about what you do, and potentially how you can help them.
Yeah, so triiyo is www.triiyo.com. You can connect with me through there, or just rebecca@triiyo.com. We do have a COVID response offer underway at the moment, which is, we know that people are at capacity. We know that organizations and managers are at capacity in terms of taking on new technology, but we also know that people are in dire need of having this connection and support. So until the end of the year, our platform is completely complimentary for any customer that wants to sign up. And we can be live within a matter of days. Because of the way we operate, we don't integrate, so we can be live within days, supporting your people. So if anyone's interested in that offer, then it is available to any size organization, for any number of people, and it's really just our way of supporting, helping support organizations to support their people better.
An amazing offer. Rebecca, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Let me acknowledge you for the amazing work that you've done. Thank you for overcoming those many no's until you got a yes. Thank you for building your own resilience, and just demonstrating what a person can do when they do have that belief. So for that,
thank you for having me.
I thank you, and I look forward, and I'm excited to see it, to see what you're going to do next with triiyo. Congratulations on everything you've done, and enjoy the rest of your day. And
lovely. Thank you, Lawrence.
No, my pleasure. And thank you, everyone, and we will see you next time.